The Trump administration is testing all sorts of ways to use or abuse government power for censorship and harassment. That brings us to a concerning story where Trump's DOJ took the very rare step of issuing subpoenas to 4 different journalists from the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal, which is a generally more conservative market paper that has been in lawsuits with Trump, and trying to force them to give basically secret testimony before a grand jury. Now, that is something that is generally hard to do unless there were really good reasons, to simplify. And the DOJ apparently didn't have them because it retreated, withdrawing the subpoenas because both outlets fought. The Post reporting on this kind of rare subpoena could be used to try to get a reporter to reveal sources, or, and this is not out of bounds to question, could be a kind of harassment tactic because the administration has already indicted a reporter in Don Lemon and tried to sort of issue these threats and warnings and just make it harder for people to do their reporting jobs. Now, when this has happened, it's rare. Over 20 years ago, the Post reported there was an instance of this. Journalists and lawyers often talk about the so-called chilling effect here, where if you can get away with this up to a point, other people and reporters, including at outlets that might not have the lawyers and backing of the 2 that I mentioned, will kind of pull back a little bit. Over the past half year, the administration has also, we should note, searched one reporter's home, threatened news broadcasters over their war coverage, barred reporters from the Pentagon press office, and more widely, threatened comedians and other artists and dissidents simply for expressing their views. And that's not all. Although Trump says many things that he doesn't always do, we should note that ABC, which has already settled a prior Trump lawsuit for millions of dollars, is now facing more threats from Trump to sue them, because caving rarely works with this kind of thing. Trump says he is concerned about their coverage of the reflecting pool, as if that is a matter worth making a federal case. And then, in a very kind of Trumpian troll, he says, I like their money, a reference to the fact that he knows they were quick to cave last time. Organizations that have also been targeted by Trump's FCC include basically going after, as mentioned, not only Jimmy Kimmel, but The View. They ordered a review of ABC's local stations using a pretext to basically try to punish them or censor them for what everyone knows are First Amendment protected programs that may criticize or make fun of Donald Trump. Now, there's a twist tonight. ABC, having settled in the past, says they're fighting back, even tapping their big audience. They have a campaign that encourages viewers to weigh in, running this public service announcement on the Trump-targeted show, The View.
I had this idea for a show. Different women, different points of view.
The View has welcomed your favorite guests and covered the issues you care about for nearly 30 years. Now, the FCC wants to control who is allowed to appear on the show. Viewers, use your voice. Scan this QR code. You have until July 6th.
What you are hearing is the sound of some corporate executives waking up from their political slumber or their very sad fetal positions of the many, many years we've been living through this. And if you, as a citizen or a viewer, are watching going, wait, now they figured out they could tap their millions and millions of viewers to actually show in a democracy that they have support, well, yes, you might have figured it out before then. But the president, who did not take their settlement as a chance to enjoy a compromise or regroup, but took it, as bullies take these type of things, as weakness that he would exploit again, well, that president is now finding that even ABC, apparently, no shade, has found its breaking point. Who served as executive editor for the Washington Post, also in the news over subpoenas there. Welcome back.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Do you see any shift in ABC's posture here?
I do. I mean, they agreed to settle with Donald Trump even before he took office, giving him $15 million and $1 million in legal fees to settle a case that they probably could have won in court. Now it appears that they are pushing back, as they should. I think that there's no reason to yield to Donald Trump on things like this, and any concessions made to him are viewed by him as weakness, and he will just be acting sort of like a predator. He'll go in for the kill, and he'll try to wound you even further.
You know, I mentioned not in jest that many viewers and politicos would look at this as a fairly obvious point, not one that needed to be learned the hard way or in 2026. Given that you've been in a leadership position where you're kind of in the mix between your journalists, the sources you cover, and to some degree, whoever owns the paper, what can you tell us about your view of that, or why there's been such slow learning among at least some business leaders?
I'm not sure I understand, really. I mean, it was evident, I think, certainly to me and to many others, that if you yielded to Donald Trump, he would just go ask for more. I think people felt that they feared, I mean, it was fear, I think, was at play. Fear that he would use the regulatory agencies against the networks, fear of further lawsuits, fear of not being able to complete business transactions that they wanted to engage in. And they thought maybe they could put that to rest. But I think that was a mistaken view. It was clear that they would never put anything to rest because Donald Trump would never be satisfied.
Yeah. On the Washington Post front, you've got a lot of solid journalists there. They've been under a tough situation. There's been layoffs and cutbacks. They've been attacked, of course, by this president the whole time. And I'm curious what you think of the journalists and the leadership that has seemed to decided to really fight this effort to put journalists in the secret grand jury proceedings and other places for reasons that we can't even really untangle fully.
Well, they would have done this when I was the executive editor, and they would have done it since, and they have done it since. They support their journalists. Look, they have been supporting Hannah Nathanson, whose home was raided by the FBI. They took all of her electronic devices. And of course, they're supporting their journalists now. Who had been subpoenaed to testify both before a grand jury, although that has now, of course, been withdrawn. They stand behind the First Amendment, and I think that one thing this case demonstrates quite well, actually, is that the news department of the Washington Post continues to do a really extraordinary job of journalism. They are working really hard in a very dedicated way, in a very determined way, to tell the public what is happening inside their government. And clearly, they're paying a price for that. The Justice Department is coming after them in the most aggressive possible way. So I think they're doing good journalism, and that.
As we reach the end of this report, it's worth stepping back and looking at the bigger picture behind today's developments. What began as a story about subpoenas issued to journalists has evolved into a much broader debate about power, accountability, and the role of a free press in a democratic society. Tonight, we heard allegations that the Justice Department sought testimony from journalists at major news organizations, including the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal. We heard concerns that such actions could create a chilling effect on reporting, discouraging sources from speaking and making journalists think twice before pursuing sensitive stories. We also saw a growing willingness from some media organizations to push back rather than remain silent in the face of political pressure. Whether one agrees with the reporting of these outlets or not, the underlying principle at stake extends beyond any single newspaper, television network, or political figure. The question is whether journalists can investigate those in power without fear of intimidation, retaliation, or government interference. History has repeatedly shown that a healthy democracy depends on uncomfortable questions being asked. Governments are meant to be scrutinized. Politicians are meant to be challenged. Institutions are meant to be examined. That process is often messy, frustrating, and politically inconvenient, but it is also essential. What makes this moment especially significant is the growing perception that the relationship between political power and the media is entering a more confrontational phase. Critics argue that legal threats, regulatory pressure, and public attacks on journalists create an environment where independent reporting becomes more difficult. Supporters of these actions often counter that media organizations themselves should be held accountable for mistakes and bias. And that's where the debate becomes more complicated. This isn't simply a story about Donald Trump. It's a story about precedents. The powers used by one administration rarely disappear when that administration leaves office. Future leaders often inherit the same tools. That's why questions surrounding press freedom tend to resonate far beyond a single election cycle. There is also a human side to all of this. Behind every headline are reporters, editors, producers, and sources who spend countless hours trying to uncover information the public may not otherwise see. Whether their work is praised or criticized, the ability to gather and publish information without undue interference remains one of the foundations of an open society. So let me leave you with a couple of questions. If journalists begin to fear legal consequences simply for doing their jobs, what effect could that have on the information the public receives? And if citizens lose confidence in both government institutions and the media that covers them, who ultimately fills that vacuum of trust? Those are questions that will likely become even more important in the months ahead. For now, one thing is clear: this story is not over. The legal battles, political tensions, and broader questions about press freedom and government power will continue to shape the national conversation. And as those events unfold, the stakes extend far beyond any single administration or news organization. We'll continue following the facts, tracking the developments, and bringing you the context behind the headlines. If you found this report insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real, fact-based news commentary. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next report.